Hello, gorgeous. Every year around this time, I love to paint clouds because they appear over our mountains and I can see them outside my studio window here. So let's paint some clouds. Every year around midsummer, I start to paint clouds because that's when I see them. I use phthalo blue, ultramarine blue, and titanium white in this painting. I will also use some rose for the mountains. I think we'll go vertical this time because I'm gonna paint a cumulus cloud tower. I love seeing these towers. I am going to put in the composition right away because clouds move a lot. In my earlier cloud paintings, I had a lot of trouble because they were moving really fast to me once I started painting them. So I just put the shape that I want to see based on my observations and I stick to it the whole time. My sky is a mixture of the phthalo blue and the ultramarine blue and the white, and I purposefully left the paint a little bit not blended so that I could have some texture. I like my paintings to have texture and variation. My favorite impressionist paintings always have that. So I try to enjoy this part of the process because it's very, very loose and enjoyable and it's easy. We want to realize that painting really can be quite easy, and so the backgrounds can be quite loose. I enjoy watching artists paint backgrounds because of this. If you're painting along with me, then you can watch, and then my voice will come back in after the background is all completed. going to paint the dark shadows on the cumulus clouds. You'll notice me looking out the window. I'm observing real clouds as I paint this. Painting from life, as I've said before, is really great for your art because you're painting from truth. It can also be challenging because there are infinite ways you can paint reality. So you have to make choices. So I'm choosing to put in the dark shadows for the underpainting. And then I can layer other values and colors over the top of that. Now I'm starting to layer some lighter colors over the shadows. My light source is coming from the west or the left hand side of the canvas. So when I make any cloud shapes, I keep that in mind so that the shadows and the lights are in the right places and the clouds look like they have volume and dimension. Now I'm going to show you how I paint the mountains. It's nice when you paint clouds that you put them in a context. Of course, you don't have to. You don't have to do any of these things. But I like to put my clouds in a context. And since I see them coming up over our mountains, I often paint our mountain peak. So I paint the mountains with ultramarine, more ultramarine in the mountains than in the sky, so I can make it a little different. Blue is a wavelength of light that travels faster and farther than the red side of the spectrum. So when you look into the distance, things will often look blue, and then as you become closer to the objects, they will have more greens and reds in them. So I'm always careful if I want my mountains to look far away that they're light and blue colored. And then you'll see once I paint the mountain later on, it will have rose and purple in it. Now I'm starting to differentiate the big shapes of clouds, the big billows of cumulus clouds. There's a big one up at the top and then a smaller one towards the middle, and then a whole lot of little shapes on the bottom. So I'm differentiating that and putting in some of the lighter midtones in the cloud shapes and around the edges, just to solidify, if you will, the shapes of the clouds more. Now you're seeing my dirty cloth a lot. So let's talk about it. I hold a cloth because oftentimes I like to just briefly wipe my brush and then change the values. There I washed it off. But lots of the times I don't even stop to wash my brush. I just wipe it on my cloth, change the value and keep going. And then when I do wash my brush, I like to dry it because I like to use thick paints usually. Now I'm adding the underpainting for the clouds that are lower down in the composition. So they are not quite as contrasty as the ones up above because I want the viewer's attention to be drawn upward to those billowing clouds that go up to the top of the canvas. So the ones at the bottom will not have as big a difference in the lights and darks. And so that I am putting the flat, darker colors first, and then layering the lighter and the lightest shapes over that. I was careful in this painting to not add too many details because in my past cloud paintings I've run into some issues adding too many details, and then the painting becomes too tight and even not as realistic. So I was careful here to let the paint work for me, and also my knowledge of the light distribution and the values to tell the story simply. And that allowed me to enjoy the process from start to finish, to stay loose and to have a beautiful painting as a result. I paint cloud studies every year, and I think I've been painting them for about 5 years now. Now I'm layering on some of those details, and you can see I'm using some of the blue. I would say it's the darker blue, but it's still quite light. And I'm going to put these billows on the cloud tower. This part is always a learning experience for me because this is the lightest part of the cloud, but the individual little billows have a dark blue line around them. So it's like the shadow behind each shape, and then the light hits the front of each one. So I want it to look bumpy, but also still light on this side. So after I added all these little details, I did go back once the painting was dry and I added some bright titanium white to the very lightest portions of this side of the cloud to make sure that it looked definitely brighter than the right hand side of the cloud. Now each of these little shapes, I'm looking at a moving cloud outside my window. And if I were to try to copy each one exactly, I would just be continually painting and repainting the shapes. And I've actually seen an artist do that. I love to watch the landscape artist of the year, and I saw an oil painter do that one day. For 4 hours, she just kept repainting and repainting, and it was pretty neat to see. It was like the clouds were developing and changing on her canvas. Now, I've tried that approach before, but it's much more challenging with acrylics, especially on a hot day that this is, because the paints dry so quickly. So I'm taking the approach of knowing how a cloud is and how it works, and taking individual shapes, yes, that I see, but also knowing how the cloud works and inventing some of the shapes as well, so that I have a composition on my canvas that I can develop and it stays the same, so I don't have to rush. And that approach really worked well for me this year. So you can see it here. Now I'm adding some more shadows to this one, and just being careful to not overwork the painting, but to have the right level of detail and ambiguity. Now you see me start to add rows to the mountains. And as I said, the red wavelengths travel slower and not as far as the blue wavelengths. So as I add red, the mountain appears to come closer to the viewer. Then I will add the shadows and the lights to the mountain. I've also painted a lot of mountain studies out my window, looking out my window. And so this is the result of a technique I've discovered, putting the underpainting and then adding the shadows and then the lights, making sure each ridge is defined by the shadows and the lights. now it's time to sign the painting. And I sign the painting the same way every time. You can't really see each letter, but I sign it the same way every time so people can tell it is my signature. And then I also sign it on the back so people can read it even better. But I really want my signature to be recognizable, but also not distracting to the main composition. Thank you so much for watching. My original art is available on Etsy. I post every week, so if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and join me again. May God bless you.